Well, welcome on in, everybody. It's another fresh stream. I'm your pal Ina Beta. We're here with episode 3 of Neurologically Speaking. We are here with Jeff, who lives with Idiopathic Hypersomnia. We're here to learn all about him this evening. Hi, Jeff. How you doing?
Yeah, they're doing well. Thank you.
Glad to
Thanks for
have.
having me.
Of course, glad to have you here. Thank you for setting aside some of your time for us. So, why don't you go ahead and start out the way we've been starting out the podcast and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I'm Jeff. I've been living in Southern California since 2009. Excuse me. I've been like avid in entertainment since actually I started playing video games since I was 3, and so I kind of knew that wanted to do something in maybe motion picture or video games or something, and so I moved out here in 2009. I've been pursuing that ever since. I've also worked for a number of different charities. And and I've been streaming for about this past August has been 6 years. So I love doing it. I love everything that I put my time into. So
Wow, all right. So what do you do for work then? I said you wanted to get into like movies and stuff like that. What do you do? What do you do down there?
I've also been a very avid writer, and I originally wanted to do something in motion picture. I actually went to film school in 2009, and that's one of the reasons why I moved out here. And even though I have a degree in screenwriting, it's hasn't seen much use lately. So there's that. But I currently work in marketing, reading a lot of graphs and looking at analytics. And there's it's both. It satisfies the analytical side of me and also the creativity side of. So and that's also one of the reasons why I do Twitch. So.
Awesome. Okay, so what is your stream like? What do you when you stream with people? What's that like? What's your community into? All that.
Um, it's been going through a bunch of different rebrandings. The latest rebranding is the Diseased, where it kind of pokes fun at the whole like. Um, I kind of got inspired from what's the movie Fight Club, where um, Jack has that conversation with I think her name's Marla, where they're like, "Oh, you can have this disease, well, I'll get this disease on Tuesday." And so I basically started a community focused around that with a lot of people joining in my Discord. I have like groups like Brain Eating Amoeba and Anthrax and all that stuff. And my currencies are which I kind of they're on hold right now, but my currencies are viruses, pathogens, germs, and syndromes. And so I've got 4 different currencies, and and my that's my entire like central focus in my stream is all the like diseases and stuff like that.
Awesome. I love it. It's almost like scientific based, but it's like a little bit faux science. I
Yeah,
like it.
yeah.
I like it. That's awesome. So yeah, we're here to, like I said, learn all about you and the condition that you live with as well. So please, if you wouldn't mind, start at the beginning and tell us how you learned about it, for symptoms and all that, and how it's being managed today, if at all.
Sure. So I guess it's probably started back in middle school when I would stay up late a lot, and I'd go to school early, and this was a consistent pattern. And I just would get maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, just not very decent and not very great sleep on top of that. So
How
I
late were you?
noticed that
How late were you staying up?
probably like three till 3 in the morning.
Oh
So
wow! By
yeah.
choice, or you just couldn't sleep? It was like you tried to go to sleep and you couldn't.
Kind of both. Like I'd listen to a lot of music and just and there was a lot of different radio stations I'd listen to, and I'd sit there and and it's like, oh, this new song's coming on, it's great, And this is back before like MP3s and stuff, so it wasn't really. I didn't really. The radio was big with me, and so but sometimes there would be nights where I want to go to sleep and I couldn't, and so it just what piled up with what was sleep debt. So and over the years it started to take its toll on me, and I started to recognize like in class I'd sit down and all I would do is yawn, like just consistently, and it started to develop from there.
Yeah, there is the line of thinking in science that teenagers have their circadian rhythm shifted a little bit later, compared to adults and children, but it seems like this was a bit more extreme.
Oh yeah, yeah, it
Yeah,
definitely was.
they're normally talking about teenagers staying up till like 12, 1 in the morning, and then maybe being up and ready for things by like 8 or 9. But no, not the case for you. It sounds like.
Yeah, I'd stay up. I would stay up late and late, well, I had to get up at 7 for school. So it just, it in over the course of, and not only that, when I get home from school, the very first thing I do would be to like jump in bed and immediately sleep. And so it was this fragmented pattern of just like inconsistent sleep and just and there were days that I would literally, I'd be sleeping on my backpack and wouldn't, and like full of books, and wouldn't even notice it. I get up and I'm just like, my goodness, how out was I? And so, and the week, obviously on the weekends I would sleep in until like 11. And so it just from an early start had this consistent pattern of just fragmented sleep, and it started to develop from there.
Yeah, never really, it sounds like a consistent circadian rhythm, they might say,
Yeah,
yeah? Is
yeah,
this all over the place? Hmm,
yeah.
interesting, and then, I mean, did something seem off to you in middle school, or like, did you assume everybody else was doing that, or was just you just living your life, never noticed it, never thought about it?
I did notice that something was off because I just, especially during like middle school and high school, like I noticed that like I mean I grew up, elementary school I mean I never, I pretty much got straight A's for a long time. And then middle school and further on and more into high school, I recognized that there were just things that I would miss. Like there were times where I would take tests or just couldn't get something, and I actually had to do tutoring. And I'm like, "What's with this?" And maybe it was. Uh, I'd have to definitely consider that maybe I didn't really put a whole lot of effort into uh, high school because I've never really had to put effort into school, and so that kind of stuff caught up with me. But I also recognize that maybe there is something to the cognitive process, since I've built up this massive sleep debt, and just inconsistent circadian rhythms to learning and education and all that.
Hmm.
So
In doing a little bit of reading about idiopathic hypersomnia, which I hadn't actually heard of before you mentioned it to me when I put out a call for interviews for people, um, there does seem to be a pattern of some cognitive difficulties sometimes. Not like they have lower IQ or anything, but there can be difficulty with attention, difficulty with recall, things like that, and just due to, like as you said, that fragmented sleep, that massive sleep debt. I mean, anybody that doesn't get enough sleep or doesn't sleep restfully is going to build up symptoms like that. Yeah.
yeah, correct. And I recognized, there were some cognitive problems a lot of the times, specifically with listening, attention spans, I mean, you know, there were, and it affected my professional life too. I would, uh, some days I would sit down, like I worked at a cable company in the past, and I'd sit down and we'd go over material, and I would just nod off, like and it would be, it's just like in the slightest moment where I just have to focus my attention, I would just hit sleep, and it's like, what's going on here?
So when you were just taking another step back, when you were growing up with this in middle school and high school and whatnot, like how much of a problem was it seen as, or like how seriously was that seen as a problem? Was it seen as like there might be something wrong with Jeff, or there is just he's just lazy and not trying? Like what was it seen as?
Um, Personally, I didn't really see it that big of a problem. I thought it was normal to just stay up late and just be you know uh, I mean, I just yawn all the time, and I thought these were, this is what teenagers would go through at the time. And there were times that I would sleep until like 8 p.m., and I thought, oh well, that's just what we did, and sometimes gaming at 2, 3 in the morning, which I can't do anymore, unfortunately. But it's there were I thought it was normal because I would be, had a regular social life, and we would play games with my friends and do all sorts of different stuff. But it wasn't really noticeable until maybe, like definitely high school, where it's like I think it's starting to affect me in some way.
Got it. So it seems like it was almost kind of invisible until it like really started to impact your performance, and maybe people outside of you, which you're of course the best marker for your own internal states and all that, but other people might have started to notice impact in your performance and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely even with you know uh, tests, grades, homework, stuff like that. It just I recognized and not only that, but teachers, they recognized a decline in grades, and it seemed like I couldn't really get past a certain ceiling in the sense that like that I do well in some classes and but poor in others, and then I would do great in other class like the other classes, but then do poor in the original ones, and so it was other people started to notice too. I think that it was taking a toll on me.
Got it. So
Mm.
when would you say that like it became such a problem that felt or someone else felt that you should look at outside help?
The getting a sleep study done was probably recommended to me. Goodness, maybe when I was like 16, but I didn't actually I didn't really want to do it. I was just like that's not for me, and but
As
I never
teenagers do,
actually.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
As teenagers do, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it eventually I recognized that it is something that I need to take a look at. When I lived in I grew up in Florida, and I moved and I was living in Jacksonville, and actually no, this was back in when I was in Tallahassee. I as I said, I was working for a cable company, and I would be going over material with trainers and stuff like that, and sometimes we would write out and install cable stuff like that. And in the middle of a ride, I would just be out, like just like sitting in the passenger seat with my head hung low, and then people would wake me up, and they're like, "Hey, let's go." Let's go install this cable. I'm like, oh my God, I'm sorry, I
"Oh, are
must
we
have not
here
got good
already?
sleep.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
we no, when did we leave? What happened?" Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, and so I recognize that it is starting to affect my professional life, and that was a big red flag for me. So I decided to take necessary steps, and I want to say, um, 2007 or 8, I went ahead and got a sleep study done. So
So, yeah, how did that go? What did the sleep study look like? What did you learn from it? All that.
um, it was interesting because in there it started to get off very simplistic, and then it got complicated as I actually had 3 sleep studies total. But the first sleep study I had, I thought I was like, yeah, this isn't going to be a big thing. It's I should be fine. And the doctor recognized that I had a fragmented sleep patterns. I've done a lot of study on sleep, and I recognize, and he told me that my brain waves would jump up into alpha while I
Mm.
was going through standard sleep phases. And he's like, "Yeah, that's your sleep is very fragmented." So I was like, "My goodness, I didn't even know."
Can
And
you
so
explain to everybody what that means when your sleep waves jumped up into alpha?
yeah, sure. There's 4 stages to sleep, maybe four and a half. I think mu is in there somewhere. I don't know, but there's beta, alpha, theta, and then delta. Beta basically, well, four waves to the brain, and um, uh, beta is kind of like you're awake. Well, pardon. I'm getting things mixed up. So
That's
there's
okay, take
four
your time.
different stages of the brain, which is beta, alpha, theta, and then delta. And but there's also 4 stages to sleep, and we aptly named 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then there's REM sleep too. I'm trying to remember some stuff I've learned. But uh, Delta sleep is basically your slow wave sleep, which is like your most deep, restful sleep. And then when you hit REM, rapid eye movement, that's when quite the opposite. Your brain is very active, and that's typically when you start to dream. And so basically, you go through these 4 stages of sleep, 1 through 4, and then you go into REM. So really, there's 5. Sorry if it was a little convoluted, but I hope you get the gist.
That's okay,
Um,
no worries.
but the doctor basically looked at the sleep pattern, and he's like, well, you're going from 1 to 3 here, and then you go back up to 2, and then he said, oh, you'd be into deep sleep, and you'd hit 2 again, and it's like, what's going on? So basically, it wasn't a full diagnosis of sleep apnea yet. Well, that was the original diagnosis of sleep apnea, but it
Got it,
wasn't a full
okay.
diagnosis yet. And then I had a sleep study done with a CPAP. I got about 4 hours of sleep, and the continuous positive airway pressure, and the machine with masks, and that basically forces air through your airways. I got 4 hours of sleep and woke up feeling like I could run a marathon. I was like, oh my goodness.
Oh, wow, okay. So
Yeah,
that seemed to give you kinda some light at the end of the tunnel then. You think you had the diagnosis, you nailed it, this is it, right?
yeah,
Got it.
and that was, I was so thrilled to find that out, and then I actually had my own CPAP machine, and I never experienced that sleep again. And I was like struggling with it. I was like, what's the pressure I need? You know, how to live when sleeping with a mask on is never a fun or comfortable thing. But it just, I went back to the doctor and they were like, oh, let's see if we can adjust it. But it, and I could never quite find what it was to get back to that sleep where I was like, I could run a marathon. And so it was that basically, I think that was a misdiagnosis or something went wrong there. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
kind of confusing.
It sounds like they did not, diagnose it correctly the first time, which happens. There's
Yeah.
a process of elimination, of course, and, for those in the audience that don't know this yet, you may be getting there, but I'm gonna get ahead of you a little bit. One of the symptoms of idiopathic hypersomnia is you'll sleep and you'll report sleeping pretty well, or at least sleeping for a long time, but you wake up and, like, you don't feel like you slept very well. Yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So, also to take a step back, when you were looking at the polysomnogram test, the sleep study that you did when they were looking at the brain waves and all that, the alpha, the beta, the delta, and the theta waves, how often were you getting into REM sleep?
Um, I don't recall. I think RIM hit about 5 times, but
Okay.
that was still fragmented too, and so
Yeah.
it was not the best.
Yeah, which is part of the that's hypothesized at least to be part of the reason why your sleep doesn't feel restful. If you're not spending a lot of time down in the theta sleep, which is the super, super deep sleep, where you're getting that's called like the more restorative sleep, where your body's actually doing what it does in sleep to restore itself. That's still being debated, of course, what that is. And then your REM sleep, which is also where you're dreaming, and also a restorative practice for your brain. If you're not getting into those consistently or staying there as long as you're supposed to, you're going to wake up feeling like you need more sleep and you did not get any sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
You hit it.
I wanted to ask you, how often when you're sleeping or at that time, before there was any sort of management for this, how often were you remembering your dreams?
Quite often, which was the interesting part. I almost remember every almost every time that I would sleep, I would remember, dreaming something, and to various degrees of like sometimes I just have slight memories, and then sometimes I wake up and I'm like, that was the absolute clearest dream I've ever had, and it was just very very vivid and strong. So,
Interesting. Okay. I would have, yeah, it was surprising. Like you said, it was surprising. It's surprising to me too. You would think that if you're not spending as much time in REM sleep, that you wouldn't remember your dreams as much. Of course, you're still going to be dreaming. When we wake up and don't recall our dreams, we still have dreamt. Um,
right.
but yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought so either. Um, yeah. So, the initial diagnosis was sleep apnea, but didn't seem to stick, right?
Right. It's shortly after that diagnosis, I actually is when I moved to California, and so I decided to seek another doctor. And what happened with that was there was one doctor I saw, and I had a second sleep study, and unfortunately, I really only slept like 4 hours that night. But I think that they had inconclusive results, and so they just but the doctor was like, no, you don't have sleep apnea, and I was like, that's really weird. And so I didn't really like that doctor for various reasons, so I went to a third, and this is one of the best sleep doctors in Orange County, and basically we went through the entire gamut of things, different medications, another sleep study, and he's like, no, you don't have sleep apnea, and um, I went through a number of different like medications and tried different things, but and I was honestly sort of desperate to just get some sort of clarification, and finally I went back to the doctor, and he's like, I we honestly can't determine. what do you have? And so we have to end with a diagnosis of idiopathic hypersomnia. And idiopathic basically means that it's unknown. For the causes are unknown, and hypersomnia being just excessive daytime sleepiness. So
Indeed, it does. I was going to define that for everybody. I'm glad you did. Yes, idiopathic means they still don't know what causes this. This specific diagnosis, idiopathic hypersomnia, is under the umbrella of things like narcolepsy,
yeah.
but it actually shares a symptom with type 1 and type 2 narcolepsy, which is called excessive daytime sleepiness, thus the hypersomnia part. But they're, unlike type 1 narcolepsy, where there's a difference, or the orexin producing neurons in the brain seem to have been destroyed, maybe through an autoimmune process. That's not the case in type 2 narcolepsy, nor is it the case in idiopathic hypersomnia. They've done, the same kind of spinal tap tests on people with idiopathic hypersomnia, and there doesn't seem to be anything different there. They're
Hmm.
looking into different, neurologies and neuropathies that might cause that, but there's no clear-cut definition or clear-cut etiology at this point. Yeah. So, with these new doctors, what kind of sleep tests did you do? Just another polysomnogram? Did you do like a multiple sleep latency test or anything like that? Or
Yeah, mostly they were polysomnograms, but I did a MSLT, um, and the interesting thing was I can remember dreaming, but the doctor's report said I didn't even hit REM sleep, which to me was, and even like in the report, they basically were like, patient, remembers dreaming, and that was in bold, and it's like that is really weird. And from that test, they determined it wasn't narcolepsy, even with the medications I was prescribed. So it was very odd with that result.
the idiopathy deepens. Indeed. Yeah, how unexpected, right? How
Yeah.
unexpected. So, yeah, you mentioned you tried medications. What sort of medications do they have you try? Any of them work? Any good effects? Any bad effects?
I think the first one that I had tried was Elavil, and I mentioned it to some other doctors, and they disagreed. But I took Elavil and would sleep 14 hours, and then woke up groggy, and I'm like, that's not working well. Um, well, what I can remember, and pardon this is several years ago, but I was also given Provigil, or I think it was Nuvigil, and I was. And that was great at first. I called the doctor's office up, and I was like, I think we did it. It's great. It's awesome. I feel fantastic, and it's the one I needed. And after like maybe a week of using that, I would get so anxious that even if I would move slightly, my heart rate was just skyrocketing. And I'm like, I just can't. I have to calm down. And I was like, I have to get off of this. Um, Neurontin was another one, and while I recognized deeper sleep with it, it wouldn't. It seemed to wear off after a while, and I was like, I don't know what's going on with that. And then Xyrem, which is a GHB, and I would have a ridiculous amounts of deep sleep to the point where I would wake up and be like starving. I think having more deep sleep actually affects hunger, but I also had terrible side effects where I would wake up in a panic and a cold sweat, and I would have ringing in my ears. And I went to them and mentioned this to them, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't have any records of those side effects." And I'm like, "Well, this is what's happening." So it just it at that point, I'm like, I tried everything I really want to. Nothing's really, I don't know where to go from here.
So, yeah, wow. It sounds like they're prescribing you things to help you sleep deeper and get rid of that fragmented sleep instead of giving you something to help you stay awake. Yeah.
Oh, a bit of both. I also tried Lunesta for a while, and it was good, but I didn't really want to. I didn't want to be hooked to it. I did 2 weeks of it, but as soon as I was off, the problems came back. And then I think I also tried Ambien as well. But I know that there's some odd problems with that one, so I only did it once, and but it was a mix of both. medications that help me sleep and some that would stay awake, but they advised against taking both. So
Yeah, those can cause some weird interactions and interfere with one another if you take both at the same time, or not at the same time, but like alternating and stuff. Yeah,
right.
interesting. Did you ever try modafinil? I've seen that that is a kind of a first line drug that they'll offer for that, as well as narcolepsy, to help promote awakeness throughout the day.
It sounds familiar. I think I may have. Are there any other names that it goes under?
If there are, I wouldn't know them off the top of my head.
Okay.
There's always like three or four
I may
different names a
have.
drug goes off of. It's confusing to say the least.
I may have tried that in the past, but it's been a while. So
Okay, okay. So you mentioned so far as yet, there's just nothing that you have taken that's really been rock solid and managed your symptoms. Yeah.
nothing medication wise or substance wise. Yes,
Okay. So there are some behavioral things you've tried then.
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, like yeah. Describe those. I'd love to hear about those.
So after I basically in that aspect of things, I lost a lot of faith in the medical community, specifically for my illness and the medications I was on. And so I decided, I would just take matters into my own hands, and I changed my diet. I increased my exercise, and the most important thing that I did was I set the most strict sleeping regimen that I could possibly come up with, which was 10 p.m. on the dot. I would turn off everything, just all computers, all lights, except the bare necessities, and I would take the hottest shower I could stand for like 15 minutes, and then after that, I would sit down in complete darkness and stretch. I would close my eyes, sit down, and just that's probably the most opportune time to be able to feel all the stress in your body. And I recognized like my leg, like my hamstrings and quads, and and especially my back and shoulders were always very tight. And so I would sit down, stretch for another 15 minutes or something, and then go to bed. And if I didn't fall asleep, I'd get up and do something boring. And I understood that this wasn't going to help me just doing it one night. It wasn't going to help me doing it 2 or maybe even a week or 2 weeks or perhaps even a month. But I just kept doing it. Eventually, what happened was I kept to this very strict regimen, and I was out like a light every night. And that has been uh, probably the most effective method of getting back to a normal state of of everything.
Amazing. All right. So you kind of designed your own behavioral treatment for this idiopathic syndrome, and it's been working out for you so far. It sounds like. How long did you have to keep at that regimen before you started to notice those results? I might have missed that.
I think that I think that kept doing it for 2 months, and finally something must have clicked where it's like, my body is like got so used to it or tired of just like, it's like, all right, here you go, here's your sleep that you've been fighting for so long, and I just had to keep that mindset. And there would be days where I'm like, I really don't want to do this, I don't want to shower, I'm already tired, I just want to go to bed, but I'm like, no, this is the rule. I have to follow it, and it worked. Now, it was better sleep? Now, was it? Did it get rid of the problem? No, but I mean, there's still some fragmented sleep in there, but uh, I found a path. I think that was, I'm very much. I try to, you know, limit my medications, and that was probably the best path for me forward, because I didn't want to start taking so many pills and knocking myself up with a lot of medications that could possibly conflict somewhere. So but that was the best for me.
Absolutely. I mean, then hooray for your discipline. A lot of people don't have that with different disorders that they're in. It's hard to do that kind of thing, and especially when you really don't feel like it. You don't want to do all those routines and stuff, but you fought too hard to let that go by the wayside, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you bring up another interesting question is like a lot of people that have different conditions like this don't necessarily want to take medication.
Yeah.
So, you have to kind of fight for yourself and find something that works for you. And it sounds like you found something that helps improve your symptoms. Of course, idiopathic hypersomnia, like other things, is a lifelong condition. It doesn't go away. but you found a way to help kind of manage that, yeah?
Yeah.
And does that so does this regimen you set yourself to, you mentioned, you're out at a certain time, that's good. Still some fragmented sleep, but two questions. Do you sleep better? Do you feel more rested when you're awake, have an easier time waking up? Well, and also, is there less nodding off during the day, do you see?
No, absolutely. Yeah. There were after my stretch, like after my entire regimen, I would hit the bed and almost immediately I'd be out. Um, and I would wake up and feel much more rested, much more energetic, and more social. A lot of the cognitive problems listening would be like they went away, and I was like, this is it. Now it's kind of rough in the sense that like I have to cut off part of my social life, but I think the benefits are. I mean, some people are like 11 p.m. They're like, hey, let's go do something, and it's like, well, I have to stick to this. But I think the benefits are much more appreciated, than over having an extended social life.
Absolutely, because I mean, if you can't be, happy living your life, then the social piece doesn't really even matter as much, right?
Yeah,
If you're gonna have that fragmented sleep and not be, not have the rest of your life is gonna go to heck, like how do you enjoy that? It can't
yeah.
be worth it, right? You mentioned a decrease in the cognitive difficulties. Can you describe that?
I'd say the biggest thing would be listening. There were times when I would have I just we would be out of it, and literally people would say the simplest sentence to me, and I'd be like, I didn't understand the word you just said. Could you please repeat it? Or it just something wouldn't click, and sometimes it was a matter of attention too. Like I just uh, I was also tested for attention deficit disorder, but I think the underlying root was the sleeping problems, and um, it's just the ability to listen and ability to think clearer just came naturally after 2 or so months of doing this strict regimen.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you were being looked at for ADHD as well, because like in my reading about this, that came up that this can often look like, or at least the cognitive deficits or difficulties that go along with this can look like ADHD. Because if you think about it, if you haven't been sleeping well, you've accrued a lot of sleep debt and you're just out of it. Like, how well can you pay attention? How well can you comprehend things that were said to you? How well does your short term memory work? And
Yeah,
how much do those difficulties look like ADHD in a person?
yeah,
There's a lot of overlap in those, and it's important to tease those out properly for people. Absolutely. And I'm glad that you were able to do that, because I mean, that could have led you down a path of stimulant medication and stuff like that that would just keep you wired, and possibly wreck that sleep schedule even more.
yeah, true.
So when you were going through all this and like your professional life and your social life and all of this, how how would you say other did you talk about it with other people, and how receptive and understanding of that were they?
There was a previous position I had with the company in the past, to be redundant, pardon. And there were times when I would nod off at my desk, and I went to my and I think my manager noticed, and I just decided, I'm gonna you know be upfront about it. And I had a private conversation with him, and I was like, look, I have sleeping problems here, and I can't, there's just I'm trying to manage it the best way I can, but just recognize that sometimes I just can't keep my eyes open. And he's like, that's fully understood, as long as you're actively seeking something, or like solution to that, it's okay. And he shared his ailments with me, and so it was interesting in the sense that, like, we both have this understanding of, like, of illnesses that can affect the work performance, and how we present ourselves in the workplace.
That's great that you felt comfortable enough and brave enough to go to your boss and say, "Hey, look, I have this thing that might be impeding my performance. I'm working with it." And you started that bigger conversation that caused him to open up and say, "Hey, I got my own stuff. I totally get it." And it's great that you found that kind of understanding with him as well. Is that the kind of thing that you noticed in many job sites or many jobs? Was it always kind of like that, or you didn't really need to come up that much?
It happened a lot, and unfortunately, it was. one of my previous positions, it was one of the main reasons that they had to let me go. Um, and I would sit there and um, try to keep my eyes open, and my boss was like right behind me, and so it was just like I would nod off, and they would recognize that, and I'm like I'm doing the best that I can with my work, but I would make a lot of small mistakes and stuff like that, and fortunately I mean it's a business, so they had to let me go for that reason, along with other ones, but it just it that's one of the things that I recognize. I'm like I have to take action because if this continues on, it's just not going to bode well for any position I have.
Yeah, sorry to hear that they couldn't. It sounds like be more understanding and work with you a little bit more on that. But I mean, yeah, it's gonna happen when you literally can't fight off that urge to sleep. Like your brain is just making you go to sleep, which is one of the symptoms of this. Like it's uncontrollable. You can't stop it when if you're not actively engaged in something, you're going to fall asleep soon. So yeah, it's unfortunate that they couldn't always work with you on that, but somewhat understandable too, I guess. Yeah. What is something that you would want everybody? I mean, if you haven't said it yet already, what is something you would want everybody to know about this specific disorder or you with this disorder?
I'd say recognize that sometimes people with this disorder, it we just function very differently, especially when it's at its worst points when we haven't when we've built up a very large debt, a large sleep debt. Is that we're not going to be very responsive sometimes, or very attentive to things, especially in listening skills too. If you know, it's debilitating sometimes when I'm trying to understand what somebody's saying and I just can't for some cognitive reason. So I'd say recognize that and be be willing to talk with people too about it in the sense that if you don't know that they have it, maybe bring in, ask them why. It's like, why do you seem out of it, or why do you seem, sort of always tired? And I'd say, yeah, just be willing to be receptive to that, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I mean, you get into a larger, I'd say, line of advice, which is if there seems to be something off about your expectation in a situation, open that line of communication. Find out more. Ask questions instead of making assumptions and giving orders. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So, what advice would you have for other people that have this condition? Or, I mean, maybe somebody hears about this, hears about you with this disorder for the first time, and realizes this in themselves. And what is some advice you would have for somebody that might think that they have this or does have this and aren't managing it as well as you are? What would you recommend, or what's
De-
some advice you have?
Definitely, I'd say try a sleeping regimen that works, and be consistent with it. That was the most difficult thing because it's not gonna work one time or 10 times. It may work 60 after the 60th time, and so I'd say, um, uh, um, definitely take matters in I don't want to say take matters in your own hands, but try to find what works best for you. Even though it may take something to that you have to sacrifice. I sacrificed, a lot of times people will call me up, hey, let's go out, and it's like I can't. I need to stick to this. But yeah, definitely develop your own strict regimen and adhere to it as much as you can.
Wonderful, awesome. I hope that reaches the people that need to hear it, and that helps somebody. That'd be awesome. So, yeah, let's move into the last segment here. Thank you for sharing so much about your experience and what idiopathic hypersomnia is and how it can affect people. Yeah, again, the whole purpose of this is to learn about that sort of thing. So, the last portion, you mentioned you were involved in different fundraising opportunities, and I saw on your social media that you had different organizations for Twitch and meetups and stuff like that. So, please feel free to tell people about those, what you do in those, and what they stand for.
No, certainly. So, like, I've been on Twitch for 6 years, and I decided that after running into some politics and things, I would pull back. In I demonetized my stream. I had affiliation. I dropped it, and so and I decided to focus my efforts with video games to be much more positive, in the sense that I partnered with a military charity called Stack Up. I'm the Los Angeles leader for the organization, and we do events and things.
So what
Um,
does Stack Up do? I've heard of it, but maybe not everybody has. What does that do?
Stack Up. It's the CEO's name is Stephen Machuga, and basically it's a organization that we have four aspects to it. Supply drops, where we send video games to veterans overseas. We have the individual stacks, which are leaders like me, and we take veterans out and do fun activities. The Stack Up Overwatch program, which is like a mental health sort of uh, mental health program. Like, hey, veterans go through a lot of stuff, and so that we try to do the best that we can to support them. And also a program called Air Assaults, where we ship veterans to conventions and things like that. So uh, we had several veterans out at the last E3, and they got to experience a really great con.
Okay, so it's geared towards connecting veterans more with gaming that they may not be able to have have those kind of connections otherwise, and also maybe help them with their mental health a little bit. Probably a lot of PTSD and stuff like that, I would guess.
Yep, true.
Awesome, great. So what else? What other organizations?
I also do a lot of stuff for Extra Life. I do a lot of influence for them, and at times I've actually gone up to the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles and toured it, and it's like it's rough walking around those hallways, seeing kids just sitting in these pardon, not hotel, hospital rooms. Um, uh, that are just sick, and it's like, are they going to live the next day? And so it's like I wanted to dedicate my efforts towards seeing kids uh, get better. And as a matter of fact, the LA hospital a couple months ago got an anonymous donor that gave the hospital $25 million, and we were
Wow,
just, yeah, we were stoked. It was fantastic. But I've worked with Lou. I think the guy's name is Lou Aducci. We ran a booth the previous E3, and people would come up and just be like, "You guys do a great thing," and they'd write a check for $400 and just give us money to for the kids. I was like, that's really awesome.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. I've heard of Extra Life before. I know that a lot of streamers will do charity streams and such like that to help raise money for the organization as well, to provide just gaming systems for kids that are stuck in hospital rooms all day. Because if you haven't ever been stuck in a hospital room for a long period of time, there isn't much to do there. So if you can imagine, kids would get quite bored, and um, that organization exists to help give them something to do. If you're going to be sitting or laying in bed all day, why not get your game on, right?
Dude.
Awesome. So any other organizations or anything like that you can plug, or anything about your stream, anything like that?
I also do social media for Twitch Los Angeles. We had our very first, I guess, for lack of a better word, a big event that was last month, and we had tons of people show up. We got to go to the new LA stadium for the Rams, and we had our event out there, giveaways, prizes, game keys, all sorts of stuff. And if you're part of the LA, yeah, if you're in the LA area, check out the Twitch LA. It's the official powered by Twitch LA meetup. So.
Okay, that one's sponsored by Twitch then. That's awesome. Does that
Mhm.
include San Diego area, or does that have its own?
There is an Orange County meetup. I guess San Diego really wouldn't be part of Orange County, but I guess now if you're in California, you're welcome to come out if we have an event. So we don't really do events as further south in Orange County, but there is a specific Orange County meetup for Twitch meetups.
Awesome. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, any other funds, organizations, charities you want to discuss, talk about, plug?
Nope, that'll do it for me.
Okay. And it looks like we have done a wonderful job explaining everything about idiopathic hypersomnia and your experience with it, because there are no questions from the audience. We must have done a great job explaining
All right, good
it.
deal.
Indeed. So yeah, unless there is anything else you wish to share with us, I asked all the questions I wanted to ask. If there's anything else, now's the time. Otherwise, I think we're gonna call it.
Check out my stream, The Diseased. I stream usually weekends, sometimes noon, sometimes 5 p.m. So
Yep.
5 p.m. PST.
Yep, and check
Thanks a
out
lot.
the stream title if you're trying to see how that's spelled. It isn't typical; it is an atypical spelling, and it'll be in the podcast description as well. So, yeah, feel free to go check him out. Sounds like he works with a lot of wonderful organizations, and it's been a pleasure talking with you, Jeff.
A pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Take it easy. All right, that is it, everybody. Shorter interview, indeed. Yeah, I'm looking to make all the interviews a little bit shorter. Actually, the first two, for those of you who are here, they lasted a couple hours, and then when I started editing, I was like, wow, these are very much in depth. These are very long, and I'm having to in reading in about what sort of things people would look for in a podcast. One of the things is they don't want them to be hours and hours long. So I'm having to edit them down a lot, those first two interviews that we did, which is fine. I'm glad that we got all the information that we did. However, yeah, very, very long. So just looking to do something about that in the future and probably have each of these stick to around an hour. If it's a little bit less or a little bit more, that's okay with me. But I want them to last around an hour. And I think we did pretty well tonight. Got about 45 minutes. That's fine. Again, pleasure having you, Jeff. Thank you for being here. Go check him out on Twitch. I know Comrade shouted out his channel earlier, so feel free to give him a follow and check him out sometime. And yeah, that's it. So as we do normally, we're going to go ahead and switch on over to the gaming portion of our stream and go from there.